Hello everyone, Long Gun here. I've watched a lot of prospecting videos and read a bunch of books on this topic, but I've never seen anyone demonstrate this particular panning technique. It's a pretty helpful skill, plus it saves a lot of gear cost and gets very high recovery. The standard panning method that is mainstream and works really well is a lot faster in most circumstances, except when it comes to finishing heavy black sand concentrates. So if you have a lot of flour gold and black sand in your pan, then you very quickly get to a point when you're panning off the surface material, and it leads to gold loss, even with a lot of agitation and care. So this is where you stop that standard method and then switch to back panning. There are many methods and gizmos to get concentrates and make them into super concentrates, but once you get them, you're still left with something to pan. I found this method to be incredibly useful, and even with highly efficient gear, it's still the final step of my cleanout process and most other people I see as well. Back panning converts these concentrates into nearly 100% clean gold, minus impurities in the gold itself, of course. And you get to pretty close to 100% of the visible gold recovery. You won't get every single dot unless you go really overboard, but with a bit of practice, you'll probably only leave behind a few cents and get 99 and change recovery. I demonstrate this back panning method on unclassified material below 20 mesh. Using classified, evenly sized material will hugely speed this process. The back panning method mirrors the action of a Miller table or waves naturally lapping against a beach, which actually leads to real accumulations of gold in many areas like around Nome in Alaska. The main drawback of this method is that it's slow, especially with large volumes in the pan, and you do get near full recovery, but it takes a long time and can get kind of tedious after several hours. I think it should be primarily used to process the final concentrates, the super concentrates of a cleanout, or to check pans in the field where you have a lot of flour gold in the pan, and so you want to get accurate counts so you can estimate, then you can back pan and get a full count without losing any gold, because you keep everything secure inside the pan itself. To convert your concentrates into super concentrates, a time-saving intermediate like a Devon Gold VDR mini sluice is recommended because it'll reduce the total amount of material that you have to pan. Originally, when we first started getting into the flour gold, it would take us 8 hours, something like that, back at our camp to pan this all out. Now we just run it through a mini sluice and then back pan the remaining concentrates, and that cut our cleanouts from about 8 man hours to generally under 30 minutes. This is a finishing technique for black sand and fine gold, so of course you should use that where appropriate. Before you begin, get your material ready, as well as a discard bucket filled with water, and of course you need a gold pan, plus maybe a comfy chair right in the sunlight so that you can really pick up on the fine gold. Be sure to wash your hands thoroughly, as oil and floating gold will make this a lot more difficult. Especially the really small gold is much more prone to float. You may use a degreasing agent like dish soap or jet try or something like that to clean the material and add it to the pan. You don't need very much of the addition, so just be careful not to oversaturate, or bubbles will eventually block your view and make a sheen on top of the water that makes it very difficult to see the fine gold, especially if it's bright or you're using artificial light. The basic steps for back panning are as follows. Number 1, you add your concentrate into your pan, or if you're using one of the bigger pans in the field, then you'd pan off the lighter material and try to get down to the black sand before you switch methods. Number 2, you dump, tap, and pool the concentrates on one side of the pan. So if you're using a Garret pan, one of those green ones with the big riffles in the front, you should gather the concentrates at the riffles on the front of the pan. And this is important because if you do it the other way around, it'll be more difficult to discard the barren material once you're trying to rinse it off. Number 3, you thoroughly tap and agitate the material with an emphasis on the area around the gold. You're trying to get it to jump up onto that little ledge if you're using a Garret pan. And number 4, you add a small amount of water until you get an even wave motion, front to back, and kind of reminiscent of a wave lapping at a beach when you're rocking the pan back and forth. It just takes a very slight little movement, probably 2 fingers, thumb and forefinger. If the material still moves around a lot, and accidental waves and swooshy whooshy kind of stuff is moving a lot of the material around and shifting your gold a lot, you probably have way too much water there. You should reduce it a little bit. You don't need very much. The idea is just to put just enough so you have full control over the field in the center and the top of the gold pan. You want the water to be able to easily move back and forth, able to move a black sand unit while leaving a gold unit of the same size behind. The water is your hand in the pan, so you want to have maximum dexterity when you're doing this. Slowly and with care, begin to rock your pan back and forth, sending the lightest material to the back of your pan, opposite of the front riffles. Keep the middle ground clear at all times for maximum visibility. This allows you to spot small particles of gold that are migrating away with the black sand to the bottom of the pan. Since the black sand is so much lighter than the gold, it'll get pulled down first, but the gold will still move around a little bit as well, just a lot slower than the black sand, of course. And so you have an opportunity there where you can use your finger to push any migrators back to the top of the pan. This allows you to filter only waste material to the bottom of the pan and accumulate a barren reservoir and a rich reservoir at the top. Once you've built up a decent amount of barren material to the point that it starts to interfere with your control of the middle ground of the pan, you just grab a cup of water and rinse and cast off the barren material into your concentrate buckets, your barren bucket. Continue the rocking and discard process, using more care and tapping more frequently as you get into the layers where gold begins to sit on top of the black sand. Tapping and agitation should force it to sink and allow you to slowly erode the surface black sand layers, leaving you with a perfectly clean pile of gold to snuffer up at the end. The discarded concentrates should be kept and then rerun through your finishing system, if you have one. And of course, keep your black sand concentrates, but not all the light sand and clay. The main idea can be conveyed just watching the demonstration. There is a feel to it, but once you get it, it's pretty easy. The light materials can be swiftly moved off, while gentler motions will be necessary as you get down to the black sands, especially if there's mixed sizes of material in your pan. As you go, you will naturally make what I call the whale tail formation. Anyway, I hope you learned a useful panning skill for free. I'd like to credit prospector Chuck P. for teaching me this method. I honestly was pretty shocked and a bit embarrassed when he showed me how easy this is, because we were messing around with the flour gold and it's very, very difficult to recover. And when he showed me that you can just take a simple gold pan and often outperform hundreds or even thousands of dollars of expensive finishing gear, my mind was pretty much blown. If I was restarting learning to prospect again, I would probably teach this technique in class 1 with the mainstream panning technique, just because it allows you to do a lot with very little. Knowledge is power, my friends. Use it to benefit yourselves and the people in your lives. Thank you for reading and listening. Long gun. It took about 30 minutes in total to do the whole pan. The remainder of the video will continue at 3 times speed.